Oh, the Joker 2. Oh, Folie, a box office bomb for the ages, never seen since Ghostbusters 2016. Have we seen this level of disaster? This level of people are going to be fired at Warner Brothers. Yeah! For the hundreds of millions of dollars that this film is going to lose. Now, the thing about Joker 2 is it's not just your normal everyday J.J. Abrams bad, where we fill your movie with member berries and explosions and nut all over the screen with action pieces and nonsense that leaves the viewer thinking, I have no idea what happened or if that was good or not. 6 out of 10. It was mildly entertaining. No, this was the Rian Johnson, The Rings of Power bad, where the writer-director deconstructs the story and the characters completely clueless as to who these characters are and oftentimes flat out wrong about what they're supposed to be doing. Yes, this is covering the story of Arthur Fleck. Now let's quickly go over what happened in the first Joker. Arthur Fleck is a mentally ill man continuously beat down by society until, well, he snaps. He breaks from reality. He murders the people who wronged him and he finds his voice, so to speak. It's a coming of age tale, but it's about a villain, so naturally he murders. He's by no means a hero or a good person, but we feel empathy and are interested in this character in this twisted world. He gets mugged by the Wayne guys and then shoots them. He gets bullied and set up and framed by his coworker and kills him. And he leaves his friend who's treated him nice and he treated nice respectively alive. He learns his mother had, how do I say this without getting canceled on YouTube? He was touched funny as a small child. He was also physically abused as a child and has a serious brain injury that leads to a lot of his negative behaviors. He also has been lied to his entire life by his mother, and that leads him to suffocate her, where he goes on the Robert De Niro show, only to realize that his idol, Robert De Niro, old Bobby D, is using him as a pincushion and a laughingstock, exploiting and mocking his entire existence for a funny 5 minutes on a TV show, and realizes it's not me who should die. It's not me who should shoot myself. It's you. It's this twisted, messed up world. The movie taps into themes of delusions and grandeur and the morality of our world and a broken mental health care system and the deceit of show business and the prominence of virality and obsession with celebrities, betrayal, childhood abuse, civil unrest, income inequality. And this is just me personally. The movie didn't fully resonate with me. I felt the abuse he gets was comical. Get it? Comical. He gets mugged, yelled at, blamed, ridiculed, fired, mugged again, loses his doctor, loses his medications, gets mocked again virally, gets touched funny. He gets hit by cars, punched in the face. He's dirty, unkempt, emaciated, depressed, delusional, obsessive, impoverished, lives with his mother. But the movie was well written. It was well done. I don't disagree with any of the positive praise it gets. Just on a purely subjective feeling, I didn't love it as much as, say, some of the other movies like a Nightcrawler, for example. But there are so many iconic shots in this movie. The subway shooting, Joaquin Phoenix's bizarre dancing in front of a mirror or just in his gross, saggy underwear, the stairwell scene, and of course, the Murray talk show shooting. And by the end of the movie, Arthur Fleck takes what he wants. He doesn't hide who he is anymore, which is ironic, and he does that wearing makeup to cover his face. The Joker is an oxymoron of himself. It's a fascinating tale of this super villain. It ends with a vagueness of what was real or not, what was made up in Arthur Fleck's head or not, and it powerfully used the unreliable narrator not just in his fake relationship, but the entire movie. Every single scene. Was it real? Was it not? And that was what was beautiful about the movie, was the vagueness, the openness to interpretation that the Arthur Fleck story got to give to us all. A lot of people said, oh, was he the real Joker or not? I don't even know if that actually matters. But here we are in the Joker 2, and what we would expect is, how is this newfound Joker, this newfound Arthur Fleck confidence going to exist in this messed up world? What is he gonna do? Well, let's just throw away the entire first movie because they completely reset Arthur Fleck back to the beginning of the first movie. He's dirty, depressed, unkempt, emaciated, delusional, obsessive, impoverished, and he lives in jail. They effectively just remade the first film and gave it a different ending. And I don't know what got Todd Phillips to believe in this. It just felt like the great art that gets interpreted the way that we were discussing the Joker. He said, no, you interpreted my movie wrong. Let me be perfectly clear. Arthur Fleck is a shitty character. He's pathetic and he should not be celebrated. I mean, this is where discussions like Death of the Author comes up, because the Joker in the first Joker movie, or Arthur Fleck, whatever you want to call him, isn't this like weak-willed, pathetic scumbag nobody? He's a criminal. He's a murderer. But you have to empathize with him to some extent for all of the things that he goes through. In a way, we are rooting for Arthur Fleck to find himself, even if it is to become this horrific murderer. That's just an unfortunate reality of the movie that you made. Alas, let's get into it. So before the film even comes out, we hear that it is a musical, and everybody who's ever enjoyed movies goes, oh boy, that's not great, because musicals for the most part are very difficult to pull off, very difficult to succeed. Most people aren't going to enjoy a musical when you tell them you go to a musical. It's like telling somebody who's trying to watch the Jets game that we're going to a Broadway show. I don't want to see a bunch of people in silly costumes singing. I just want to see two grown men hit each other and guys dressed like zebras throwing yellow paper at them. That's entertainment. But the musical aspect is supposed to be connected to the story. It's finding your voice in a literal sense for Arthur Fleck to find his voice in a more metaphorical sense. So I guess that works. The thing is, as far as the musical aspect of the movie is concerned, they did just a not great job. There's a lot of this quiet whisper singing, talking singing most of the time. There's one performance where Lady Gaga's belting it out on the piano, but the line she repeats is, "We're gonna build a mountain, we're gonna build a mountain, we're gonna build a mountain, we're gonna build a mountain." And they just repeated that line about 17 times. I think that was supposed to be the best, most prolific song. There's not one single song in this movie that stuck with me. When I think of the past musicals that I've seen that were good, I think Sweeney Todd, the little kid who fucks everything up. I remember the song. No one's gonna hurt you, not while I'm around. When I think of A Star Is Born, I know every one of those songs was on the radio for 70 years, but you know, I'll always remember us this way. Shallow. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. When I think of Grease, I'm like, Grease Lightning. The one that I want. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Even that silly Witcher show. Toss a coin to your Witcher. Good musicals, you remember the songs after the show is over. They stick with you. That's what a good song does. I've watched this movie twice now, gonna be 3 times. I cannot remember a single song from this movie. None. And that's a major red flag when you're talking about musical movies. While I do recognize this is a jukebox musical, that means there's no original songs, which by the way is its own baffling decision. Why would you hire Lady Gaga, the most talented performer of our generation? Well, and then you say, listen, I just want you to be here, sing, and provide mediocre acting. What are we doing here? That doesn't mean that the songs that they sing have to also be poorly sung and forgettable. So the next thing we hear about this movie before it comes out is that Lady Gaga is Harley Quinn. Now, say what you will about Lady Gaga. I think her singing is I think that the persona that she portrays to get famous is But as far as singing and performers are concerned, she's up there with some of the best that have existed. You know, the Madonnas, the Beyoncés. You have to give her credit there. And her acting is above average. In fact, most of the acting of this movie was superb. You had Brendan Gleeson, I believe that's his name, playing the big fat actor who's actually the antagonist of the whole show. Lady Gaga was, I'll say, above average. Her range, she wasn't asked to do too much beyond be sort of love interest and then disappointed. The actor who played Gary was once again incredible. The Harvey Dent was this fun little smarmy character. I think Joaquin Phoenix, I believe most people said that he was great in this movie. I have to disagree. I didn't feel the same weirdness, cringiness, uncomfortable that I was feeling. And I don't know if it was the performance that he put on. I don't know if it was the directing and the cinematography that kind of didn't give you that same gross feeling. But when I was watching the original Joker, I rewatched it before this review, and I felt disgusted when watching. I felt uncomfortable every time Arthur Fleck was on screen. I was never sure what he was gonna do. I was never sure who he was. I was always a little terrified. Is he gonna snap? Is he gonna do something horrific? Even after a second watching, he just felt uncomfortable. You felt dirty watching the original Joker movie. And in this one, it felt like he tapped more into his Johnny Cash sort of acting. He did the weird thing and he did a little bit of dancing, but it felt less like Arthur was an unhinged lunatic, and it felt more like Arthur was getting, I don't even know, normal is what it felt like. He reacts to Lady Gaga lying about her Tinder profile normally, and he questions her. And regardless, the movie opens up and there's this cute little animation that basically states the entire theme of the show. There's this shadow version of the Joker, this shadow of Arthur Fleck, who is his alter ego. He commits the crimes and Arthur gets blamed. I know that that's the ultimate message of Joker 2, also known as Joker Folie, it just, that's not the first film at all. That's not what happened in the first film. It was Arthur slash the Joker, they are kind of one and the same. But like I said, we're throwing out the first movie altogether. This is the Joker 2. So just like in the first movie, Arthur is sad, quiet, depressed, doesn't talk. He used to tell jokes to get cigarettes from the guards. He doesn't do that anymore. He just kind of is going through the motions. Life is bleak. The guards ridicule Arthur. People start fights and he doesn't even bother to look up. He doesn't care. He's just resigned to his miserable fate. And then there's about 7 more scenes just to emphasize that he's still resigned to his miserable fate and depressed. That's one thing about this movie. It is horrifically boring. I went to second monitor real quick watching this. Just scenes that repeat what we were already told 1, 2, 3 more times. Oh look, Arthur Fleck is sad. Here's Arthur Fleck being sad more. Here's a fight breaking out behind him and he doesn't look up. Here's him getting cut by a razor and he doesn't look up. Here's him getting made fun of and he doesn't look up. Oh look, he's sad, he's sad, he's sad. And then for some reason, Arthur gets put into the music class with Lady Gaga, one of the guards that he's kind of interacts with on a frequent basis. Says, oh, Arthur, I got you into the music class. And he kind of perks up a little bit. He goes, really, music? And he starts to do a little bit more of the Joker movements that he did back in the first one. Now, it would be interesting if we kind of went in depth into the relationship that he has with the guards here, but he doesn't. It felt like they were almost building a friendship, because me personally, somebody who killed 6 people, I probably wouldn't get him into a music class with a bunch of people. I would say, I'm gonna leave you at the bottom of a well and make sure that you die and nobody ever remembers you. It doesn't feel like you'd want to treat a murderer positively, but they start to build upon this sort of relationship between Arthur and this guard whose name I don't think we ever get. So he sees Lady Gaga. She comes out and does the bang head thing that was iconic in the first one. It'd be nice if a sequel was able to make their own iconic moments, but I digress. In fact, I'm not even sure if it makes actual sense that she knows that this happens, unless Arthur told somebody that this is what he does when he's at the beginning of his character arc in the first movie, and then they remade it in a TV movie about the Joker. I don't know. And then they introduce us to a counselor who kind of restates the theme of the movie. Arthur Fleck underwent a split, and that alternate ego of his committed the crimes, not Arthur. We're introduced to this woman who's ultimately going to be his lawyer. They kind of give her she's a good person. She immediately puts a coat on him because the guards decided not to when they walked him through in the rain. And then we also have this, I don't know, therapist, counselor. And she was the one who was supposed to be killed in the last movie. Arthur has fully reached his potential at the last one. He is the Joker. And then he walks out of the room where she interviews him with bloody footprints. So we all said, oh boy, she got killed. I wonder, is he trying to break out? What's happening here? Well, that was all just a figment of his imagination. It was made up. That never happened. That's the answer that Todd is trying to tell you. Do you feel better knowing the answers now? Arthur talks to Lady Gaga for a little bit, and this is where she starts to gas him up. It turns out that she's the super duper number 1 fan in the whole wide world of the Joker's actions, and she made him feel whole and alive and wasn't alone, etc., etc. And then they both start to buy into this quote unquote delusion of the Joker. He starts to smile and act like his old self. She continues to push and enforce this side of him, this split of his personality, if you will. Themes. And just a side note as a complaint, the original movie, he wasn't the Joker because he wanted to impress a girl. He was the Joker because that was who he was deep down. That was his persona that he adopted or created to deal with the real world. And it kind of feels like Arthur Fleck loses his agency in this show. We talk a lot about the other gender losing their agency because they need to fit to whatever this men's world is making them be, this patriarchal society that they have to exist in. Well, it feels like we've been doing the opposite, and we continue to do the opposite here with Arthur Fleck. He's no longer a proud murderous machine. He's doing it because he likes this girl. That's who the Joker is. It's not a culmination and a summation of his entire life events into a persona. It's because he likes Lady Gaga. It's just disappointing to watch. It's frustrating, and I don't know what the hell we're doing with this sequel of a movie. Why did we make this? I know the first one made so much money that we have to create a sequel. That's the law of capitalism. But did we really? Harley says she got committed to Arkham. She had awful parents. Her dad died in a car accident. The scene works well. The actors play off of each other really solidly. I appreciate Lady Gaga's acting chops. Joaquin Phoenix, as always, is a professional. And then they start to break out into song. And the song doesn't move the plot along. You gotta do there like the... And And that's another issue with the musical aspect of this musical that's not really a musical. They're repeating what happened in the scene before them, or they're repeating events that we already know. The song goes, forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy, get ready for the judgment day. I mean, we know this already. The singing was weird. They did the talk singing. The point of the song was unnecessary. They've already told us that. It's just all of these things that make up the movie. They didn't need to happen. Arthur makes a joke with the guard, and we actually have a fun scene here because he goes, huh, you made a joke again. Are you back, Arthur Fleck? And then he gives the guard a pat on the back, and the guard smacks him in the back of the head because that's not the dynamic of the relationship that they have. Arthur is sort of overextending himself, and he needs to be put back in his place. Think about that later on in the movie. Themes! And then welcome to the cafeteria. 20% of the movie takes place here. Harvey Dent, the DA, is seeking the death penalty when he's putting Arthur Fleck on trial. Arthur sings a song about how he's happy that he's in love now because he met Lady Gaga. And just kidding, this whole scene was made up in his head. It never actually happened. The unreliable narrator in the Joker 2, Folie, Deux, just doesn't quite make the same impact, and honestly doesn't make the same level of sense as the original, because the original, obviously the relationship, if you were paying attention well enough, you could say, you know, this doesn't seem like how somebody would react. This doesn't look like how an actual scene would happen. And it's completely made up in his head. They double down and show us that it was all made up in his head later on in the movie. And we go, wow, that's beautiful. How much of this is actually made up? How much of this is actually happening? And then in the Joker 2, Faloopa-doop, the only things that we know for sure are these little singing set pieces that were probably the highlight of the movie, the best at least put together and most fun to watch, were completely made up. Obviously, they were occurring in his head. And then some of the Lady Gaga scenes, the Harley Quinn breaking into a super lockdown cell, is probably in his head, although it doesn't quite track some of the logic and some of the things that they talk about either. I don't know. So Arthur's singing, and even though this is all nonsense and made up in his head, there's this fun little guy that's just kind of vibing out to the Joker coming out and being himself again. Keep that in your back pocket for later. This chubby guard asks Arthur to sign his book, and after he's rude, Arthur just writes, "Go fuck yourself." And I like this scene because his sort of friend, the fat guard, goes easy now because he knows that Arthur might just snap on him. We start to get traces of this Arthur Fleck returning to who he was in the last movie. You know, a little uncomfortable. Is he going to do something to this guy? Is he going to be mean? Is he going to be nice? Is he going to stab him in the neck? We don't really know, and this was a really well done scene. Lady Gaga and Arthur are watching a movie. I guess they're boyfriend and girlfriend now. We've kind of really skipped through their relationship. They went from I don't know who you are to we're all of a sudden gonna make out in the rain really fucking fast. I know it's not a romance novel, but I just kind of needed a little more interactions from Arthur going to I don't know who you are to I'm in love. But Gaga tries to boost Arthur's confidence. She burns down the movie room, and then you see that she's the real crazy one of the two of them because she doesn't react, and Arthur tries to act like a normal person and run away from a fire. They kiss and run around for a little bit. It's not really musical pilled, but it's more of a scene that has music in the background, and they do the talk singing a little bit. I thought they were actually gonna escape at this point. They end up just singing to each other and being romantic and talking to each other, and then they make this like fake escape attempt, but they really just wanted to sing to each other. The scene was well shot again, but it was just mostly meaningless. We accomplished everything that we accomplished in this scene in the last one. They like each other. She's trying to bring the Joker back. He's kind of in between, but he's in love. And then the guards throw Arthur into solitary. He gets visited by Lady Gaga. But does he? I don't really understand if he does or not here. In the logic part of your brain, you go, there's absolutely no way when you get locked in solitary, they'd allow a girl to come into your room and have sexual relations with that woman. That just isn't allowed in prison. But she puts makeup on him, and then they talk about pregnancy later. Now, this is the only scene where the two are intimate in that way, mostly because Arthur is in jail. But then talking about pregnancy, this is the only time that we see them together. You'd have to think either A, she's completely lying, they've never done it before, and she's saying that they're pregnant, or B, this scene actually happened. It's really just a weird direction to take the unreliable narrator trope. The last one, we had scenes that we absolutely knew were made up, and then we had scenes that we were like, well, is that made up? It's presented as real too. And in this one, I don't know what's made up and I don't know what's not. I don't know what I should actually be taking away from this movie is real and what's not. It just turns into this kind of confusing what is going on mess. already thrown off balance watching this movie because they basically rewrote Arthur Fleck's character to fit their narrative that they're trying to tell here. So anyway, he gets interviewed by a TV host that reminds you of Murray. He presses him and pushes him and prods him a lot and kind of treats him like trash, kind of like Murray. Counselor says, just be yourself. And you have to go, oh my God, themes. And I'm going to be honest with you, the second time I watched this movie, I couldn't believe how forgettable the Joker 2 Fadoop is, because I didn't remember this interview occurring at all. Mostly because we don't get any new information from it. Mostly because it wasn't needed in the film at all, because we've already seen this entire character arc. In fact, the first hour and a half of this long 2-hour and 20-minute movie is just repeating the character arc that Arthur went on last. Is honestly a waste of time. The interviewer pushes Arthur, and then eventually Arthur snaps and he fights back and he does his own version of talk singing. Now, I did like the way that Patty, the interviewer, kind of went, what the fuck is happening here? And again, the song that he sings reiterates what we already know. I just wanted to point out that I like the actor's reaction to the musical starting. The guards, who are kind of his friends but not really, are almost enamored in him singing. And then there's some weird themes going on that don't really get broached about him being this manipulator, kind of coercing groups that are being rowdy into doing things and being rowdier. It doesn't really get approached by the script, but there's like this idea here that Arthur is able to rile people up into behaviors. And then we cut to Act 2. Arthur is now on trial. So we got a good scene here, and it's great acting from Joaquin Phoenix. He's showing that Arthur is pretending and putting on all the faces that he did. The crazy laugh, the smile at inappropriate times. He's just practicing, in a sense, the crazy persona of the Joker. The thing is, if you remember, Todd Phillips in your original movie, the Joker had to practice being normal. He had to learn when to laugh in somebody's stand-up routine because he didn't know when the punchline was. He had to learn when to laugh and fit in with the others because he didn't know how to be normal. His insane laughter at inappropriate times was who he was. That was his disability that he suffered from. It wasn't an act, a persona that he put on. And then he drives by a bunch of rowdy riots that are outside of the trial building. People are protesting, they've got their signs up, all this great cinematography. But it reminds me of how well they built up this powder keg of a city that Gotham was in the first movie. Gotham felt like this living creature, this violent city of frustration that's about to explode. It was a powder keg of a city, and Arthur was simply the match that lit it all on fire. Arthur didn't build this city up. He didn't destroy the city. He just was the final straw before everybody snapped. The riots started happening and they started destroying the city, so to speak. And then this one, we get no sense of what the city is. Obviously, the movie takes place in the Arkham jail instead of in Gotham City, and we don't really have the pulse on the city, the pulse of the nation. We don't know what's going on. They may say a few lines here or there. Yeah, the city's really turning to heck, isn't it? Sure is. I'm glad I'm not there. And then that's the extent of exposition that we get for this city that's going to turn into a literal powder keg later. And it hurts watching this movie and watching the good Joker movie in 2019 back to back. You see what good cinematography, what good exposition, what good acting, what good writing is. And then you see Joker Badoo Phenomenal. Once again, Lady Gaga is singing here and she showed up late. I don't really know why she showed up late. This might be, I think when they blow up the courthouse later, this might be the idea that she planted the bomb and then it went off, 4, 5, 10, 20, however long this trial was days later. It doesn't seem to track. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's how bombings work, where you plant a bomb and then leave it for days or weeks. But she shows up late to do this horrible singing. My friend, who's a complete normie, she likes Lady Gaga, but she doesn't know anything about the Batman universe or the MCU, DC. She just said, why is Lady Gaga singing so poorly? Why is her singing so bad in this scene? And it is. Her voice breaks. She doesn't hit tones correctly. I don't know. The counselor continues to put together arguments about this alternate identity. And in a sense, they almost shame Arthur for his decisions and the actions that he makes. And they say it's because he's a little pathetic bitch who snapped. And that's the defense of his lawyer. So after going through basically the entire first movie, but only picking apart the pieces that made Arthur feel like an insignificant loser, and then they get his face and he goes, I feel bad about this. I feel bad about this. He goes off and fires his lawyer and then chooses to represent himself. And the crowd goes wild. They're all like, yeah, Joker's back, baby. He shows up in the makeup. And then we have what everybody calls their favorite scene of the movie. And I can only say that from the purely acting perspective of Gary, who was in the last movie, who Arthur let live. Arthur was nice to him. He was nice to Arthur and never made fun of him. There was this sort of relationship between them that showed that Arthur isn't a completely chaotic, evil, kill everybody type of person. And it gave some depth to Arthur. It gave some nuance to his character that we really needed to see, because for the most part, we just saw that people were mean to him and then he goes off and kills everybody. So there was actually a good side to Arthur's Joker persona. And then we see the fallout of this as far as Gary's concerned, that he can't sleep anymore. He doesn't feel safe. Arthur/Joker made Gary feel insignificant, small, barely human anymore. And these are the fallouts, the consequences of his actions, and it breaks down Arthur's persona. Arthur, on the other hand, I don't understand what the defense is, what the goal is of what he's trying to do here. So his lawyer that he fires is trying to argue for this split personality persona thing that's going on. And then he fires her because she embarrasses him so much. And then he wants to become the Joker again. And so he fires her. He questions Gary in that stereotypical Southern lawyer accent. I sound like Foghorn Leghorn, don't I there, Mr. Puddles? And then he proceeds to make fun of Gary's last name. For about 15 minutes, he makes a little joke about the guy he killed's last name. And then he says, haha, I'm the Joker, now go fuck yourself. The law aspects of this movie was done so poorly. A, it doesn't make sense. Why is he allowed to walk around so freely and approach and threaten the jurors, threaten the stand? He's just allowed to get away with so much stuff, like wearing makeup, representing himself when he has no idea how to represent himself and how the proceedings occur. You have to know what steps are followed, the words that you're allowed to say. You can't just go on and be like, now I'm a lawyer, I saw one show before. Not to mention that this judge is just nonsense. I wanted to like the judge. He came out and he's like, I'm a straight-laced judge. You're not gonna make this courtroom a circus. And then they do anyway. There's so many good movies and TV shows that did courtrooms well and were engaging and exciting. A courtroom is the most exciting place to be, but you can still make a movie that takes place in a courtroom fun, interesting, engaging. And instead, we make fun of Gary's name for about half an hour. Like, what are we doing here? What was the point of this? This should be the culmination of Arthur returning to his form. And then eventually we get the scene where Arthur gets grappaed. And I just don't know why this was here, other than Todd Phillips said, you know what, I'm going to make fun of anybody who thought that they wanted to cheer on the Joker, who wanted to be on his side. I feel like being the victim of a grappe, you'd be more empathetic to them, so that logic doesn't really follow. But it just came out of nowhere. The guards got mad because Arthur became the Joker. Arthur acted like his old Joker self and he was back to being flashy and wearing the makeup and wearing the suit, and he calls them fat and stupid. And I guess that causes them to want to grappe him and take his humanity. Now, to me, just writing a script, I would say, oh, if they're gonna do that, then I feel like they would further push Arthur outside of his reality, push him to be more extreme in his and exorbitant in his behavior, push him to be a more extreme version of himself, not have him regress and be more in touch with reality and be more Arthur. I feel like the interpretation of a grappe was poorly done here. Why it was done doesn't really seem to make too much sense. I know that there's some psychoanalysts out there on Reddit writing 8,000 word dissertations that say, oh, the guards saw themselves as better than Arthur. Then when he's on trial, he makes him better than them. So they wanted to grappe him. And I mean, I guess there's a certain line of logic there that might follow. Then Arthur basically disappearing and turning into a shell of himself that is the Arthur Fleck of the beginning of the movie. It just doesn't make sense to me. The math doesn't add up. Anyway, we come full circle. There's no longer Joker. It's just Arthur in his brain. And that's what the guards say when they're grapping him. He's like, we know it's only Arthur in there, which makes me stand to think that the message of this movie, that there is no shadow version of himself, that Arthur is just a bad person, makes me think that we're supposed to be siding with the guards that are grapping him. I don't fully get what we're trying to do here. And then Harley Quinn gets the ick and walks out. She says, I don't want anything to do with this. Arthur is about to get put in jail for the rest of his life or get the death penalty. And then the courthouse explodes. I don't know why it happened. Remember the civil unrest that we built up in the last movie? That didn't happen at all in this one. The courthouse just explodes randomly because we need action. Why? I don't know. this shot would kill him, but whatever. It's Hollywood. Who made this bomb? Couldn't tell you. Maybe it was Harley when she was singing around here 2 hours ago in the movie. It's the only explanation I got. And then we have Joker fanboys that pick him up as he's walking around in the devastation. Although I thought all the fanboys didn't like him because he said, there is no Joker, there's only me. Apparently these guys are still on his side. They pick him up and they start talking about how they're gonna fuck up the city, they're gonna destroy everything. And then Arthur Fleck runs away because he's ashamed. He runs away from them. He runs away from the people who look like him. The symbolism. So he meets up with Lady Gaga. She says ick and he ends up back in Arkham. And we have literally come full circle with Arthur Fleck for no reason. And then we stab him. And it was such a huge disappointment of a movie. And there's a ton of reviewers out there on YouTube who are saying the people who went to the theaters and watched this movie like I did, I 100% didn't just watch this online. I went to a theater. They were completely silent. The confusion, the disappointment, the shock in a bad way of normal everyday people watching this movie goes, why, what just happened? It was a disappointment. We took this character, we abused him as a child physically, and he has a traumatic brain injury. He gets mocked, beaten up as an adult, taken off his medications. He killed some people, then ends up in jail, depressed again, gets gassed up by a fangirl, returns to his form, then gets repaid, then gets stabbed to death, and we're supposed to feel happy that this happened? Sad that this happened? I think the biggest problem with enjoying this movie, the biggest issue that we're having, a sort of barrier to entry for watching the Joker 2, is that it has nothing to do with the original Joker. This isn't the same Arthur Fleck. This is a completely rewritten character that has nothing to do with the character arc and the journey that we saw in the last one. It really feels like Todd Phillips made this nuanced villain origin story that we all enjoyed the character, how complex and twisted it was. And he said, no, you're watching it wrong. You're not supposed to like him or the movie. And then he made this one. And I was disappointed in the lack of arc that came with his story with the guards. What was the point of the friendship that we were building up with them? What was the point of making them the clear antagonists where they beat the other inmates, where they killed his friend who also had no point? I don't know why he was here other than just to be a guy who kind of cheered on Arthur, whatever he did. There's no comeuppance, no moral lesson, no story, no nothing. It just, they exist to be horrible. And then that's the end of the movie. All in all, the Joker 2 Folie is just it's a bafflingly meta movie that fails on what the message it's trying to preach. I think Todd Phillips was just mad that you enjoyed the first movie and you resonated with some of the stories that it was trying to tell. It presents this false conclusion of the first one that there's this some sort of shadow entity, and they continue to bring it up and bring it up and bring it up in the courtroom, only for Arthur to say, no, that's not what happened at all anyway. It's a waste of time, and in a meta sense, it insults the fans for caring about Arthur only because he was the Joker. That's what this story is trying to tell through Lady Gaga, but that's not true. We cared about Arthur because we cared about Arthur and the story he went through. And then we conclude the movie by retconning and assassinating Arthur, shaming him, graping him, and then shanking him in a dirty, gross prison hallway. Even after repenting and owning up to his mistakes and accepting responsibility, he gets the ultimate punishment, and we get key jangled of some random nobody in the background is the real Joker. Look at how he carves his face. This film feels like an irony, a self-righteous attack on the people who enjoyed the first movie. How's that for a bad joke?